The cameras had barely settled on their angles when the tension in the studio air became impossible to ignore because Kelly Clarkson had just delivered a monologue that blended her trademark warmth with a razor edge of criticism aimed squarely at Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and while the audience laughed nervously at some of her quips, there was no mistaking the sting in her words. She questioned the couple's choices since stepping back from royal life, suggested they were constantly playing the victim, and even insinuated that Harry seemed lost without the guiding structure of his family tree. Harry, who had been waiting in the wings as part of a surprise guest segment, was not meant to hear it live, but the producers had made the risky decision to cue him early, and as he walked onto the set with a strained smile, it was immediately clear that he had heard every word. Kelly's jaw dropped ever so slightly, her own surprise colliding with the weight of the moment, and the audience gasped louder than they had at anything in her opening. Harry did not sit right away. Instead, he stood firm in the center of the stage, his posture that of a man both defensive and defiant. He began by thanking Kelly for her honesty, but the measured tone of his voice barely concealed the rising fire in his chest. He spoke of resilience, of the difficulty of carving out a new life under relentless scrutiny, of the pain that came not from abandoning duty but from trying to redefine it. He countered her remarks about victimhood with an assertive claim that speaking truth was not weakness but a form of courage, and as his words gathered force, the atmosphere transformed. What had begun as a routine episode of light-hearted banter now felt like a live trial, a battle of perspectives before millions. Kelly attempted to interject to soften the blow, but Harry pressed on, his voice stronger with each passing sentence. The audience leaned forward, caught between shock and awe at the prince's willingness to challenge a beloved American icon on her own stage. Kelly finally managed to cut in. Her trademark smile stretched across her face, though it looked far tighter than usual, and she tried to frame her earlier comments as playful honesty meant to spark conversation rather than attack. But Harry was not willing to let the subject slide so easily. He reminded her and the viewers that every quip, every offhand remark from people in positions of influence contributed to the larger narrative that defined how he and Meghan were seen across the world. He spoke of the damaging effects of ridicule, the way it piled onto already immense pressure, and how jokes could quickly turn into weapons when amplified by tabloids and social media. Kelly shifted in her chair, her eyes narrowing as if trying to gauge whether she should double down or step back, and for a moment it seemed she might apologize, yet her instincts as a performer pushed her forward. She argued that public figures, especially royals, had to accept humor and even criticism as part of the spotlight that they chose to step into. Harry fired back immediately, his tone steady but resolute, saying that there was a crucial difference between critique rooted in accountability and casual dismissal of lived experiences and trauma. The audience applauded loudly, sensing the courage in his rebuttal, and Kelly visibly stiffened. The cameras caught her lips pressed tightly together as though she had not expected him to strike back with such eloquence. Harry took the opening to explain how narratives twisted into ridicule had strained relationships, fractured trust, and at times threatened the very sense of safety, and he warned against underestimating the damage done when empathy was abandoned in the name of entertainment. The moment had shifted again, now less a talk show exchange and more a clash of values. Live on air. Silence after Harry's words lingered like a heavy curtain before Kelly tried to reclaim control. With a laugh that did little to mask her unease, she leaned forward, clasping her hands, and spoke with deliberate calmness, insisting that her intention was not to belittle him but to highlight the contradictions that many viewers perceived between his message of privacy and his repeated presence in documentaries, interviews, and memoirs. Harry did not shy away from the challenge, his eyes locked with hers as he countered that transparency was not hypocrisy but survival. He explained that for too long silence had been weaponized against him and Meghan, allowing others to define their story while their voices remained suppressed. He reminded the audience that choosing to speak was not the same as demanding constant attention, but rather a fight to reclaim truth from relentless distortion. Kelly pushed back, arguing that audiences struggled to reconcile the plea for space with the visibility the couple maintained, and that confusion bred skepticism. Harry leaned forward now, his voice edged with both frustration and conviction, saying that skepticism was understandable but dismissal was destructive. He pointed out that no one asked the same questions of others who shared their journeys publicly, yet when it came to him and Meghan, their every word was picked apart. Kelly's smile faltered as the audience responded with a mixture of applause and murmurs. She shifted again in her chair, visibly aware that the balance of sympathy was tilting. Harry took a breath, the fire in his voice tempered by a sudden vulnerability Kelly as he admitted that he sometimes questioned whether speaking out was worth the relentless backlash, but that in the end he could not betray his own truth. The raw honesty in his confession seemed to catch Kelly off guard, leaving her momentarily speechless as the cameras captured every flicker of discomfort across her face. The audience sat suspended in that tension, their eyes darting between Kelly and Harry as though watching a match where the next move could determine everything. Kelly finally drew a deep breath and reminded Harry that she had built her career on speaking directly to her fans with honesty, even if it meant ruffling feathers. She insisted that humor had always been her way of breaking down difficult truths, and she suggested that perhaps the real problem was not the joke but the sensitivity surrounding it. Harry tilted his head, his jaw tightening before responding with a calm yet deliberate force. He said that humor without empathy could easily become cruelty cloaked in laughter, and that when such jokes came from beloved cultural figures they carried the power to legitimize prejudice. The studio erupted in gasps and scattered claps as his words landed harder than expected. Kelly tried to interject with another burst of levity, but Harry pressed on. He recounted moments when Meghan had cried alone in the dark, feeling the weight of ridicule disguised as comedy. He said that every cutting remark, no matter how small, felt like another stone placed on a growing pile until it became unbearable. The audience grew quiet, some visibly moved. Kelly's attempt at banter faltered, and for the first time her usually unshakable confidence looked dented. She leaned back, forcing a smile that no longer reached her eyes. Harry then turned to the crowd. Rather than Kelly addressing them directly, he asked if they had ever laughed at a joke about someone without realizing that the subject of that laughter might have been breaking on the inside. His voice carried a raw sincerity that was impossible to ignore. Kelly glanced toward her producers as if seeking rescue, but no cue cards could soften what had already been unleashed. The segment had transformed from entertainment into testimony, and the clash between host and guest now carried the weight of something far deeper than a fleeting exchange. Kelly adjusted in her seat, her smile replaced by a more serious expression as she acknowledged that perhaps she had underestimated the depth of the pain behind Harry's perspective. She admitted that while she believed in humor as a tool to connect, she could see how her words might have landed differently than she intended, but she also reminded him that millions of people wrestled with similar struggles without the platform or resources he and Meghan possessed, and she argued that with visibility came responsibility, not only to share but also to withstand the reactions. Harry did not flinch, his eyes steady as he replied that he had never denied his privilege, but insisted that privilege did not erase pain, nor did it shield anyone from mental anguish. He reminded her that fame magnified wounds rather than healed them, turning every struggle into a spectacle dissected by strangers. Kelly nodded slowly but pressed again, asking whether Harry ever feared that by confronting critics so openly he risked perpetuating the very cycle he wanted to escape. Harry inhaled sharply before answering that silence was the greater risk because it allowed untruths to calcify into accepted fact. His words resonated deeply with the audience, who erupted into applause, their clapping echoing through the studio walls. Kelly's composure faltered slightly and she exhaled as though conceding ground, yet her instincts as a performer would not let her retreat entirely. She leaned forward and said that at least in America, part of surviving the spotlight meant learning to laugh with it, to bend with the blows rather than bracing against every strike. Harry replied softly but firmly that sometimes laughter was not healing but hiding, and that refusing to acknowledge pain did not make it disappear, it only pushed it deeper until it threatened to break someone entirely. The vulnerability in his tone shifted the energy again, leaving Kelly visibly contemplative while the audience hung on the edges of their seats. The tension in the studio had now evolved into something far more layered than anyone expected. What began as a sparring match was slowly becoming a raw dialogue about pain, resilience, and the price of fame. Kelly, sensing that the audience's sympathies were leaning toward Harry, attempted to pivot. She softened her tone and reminded him that she too had lived much of her life under scrutiny. She spoke about the tabloid obsession with her weight, her relationships, and her career highs and lows, and how she had sometimes cried behind closed doors despite smiling on stage. Her confession earned a ripple of empathy from the crowd, and even Harry's expression softened for a moment, yet he quickly reminded her that while their experiences overlapped, there was a stark difference between personal criticism and the centuries-old institution of monarchy intersecting with modern media frenzy. He explained that every move he and Meghan made carried global headlines, shaping not just their reputations but also their safety and the way the children would be perceived. Kelly leaned forward, eyebrows raised as though she had not considered the generational impact of ridicule. Harry pressed further, recounting threats he had faced, the hostility Meghan endured, and the long-lasting scars left behind by a world that demanded vulnerability but punished it brutally. Kelly exhaled deeply as the gravity of his words hung over the studio. The audience remained hushed, transfixed by the vulnerability unfolding live before them. Harry's voice dropped lower, now almost breaking, as he admitted that there were nights when he questioned whether leaving his royal rule had been worth the ceaseless storm, yet he said he would choose his family over duty again every single time. That statement brought the loudest applause of the night. Kelly sat back, her expression torn between admiration and frustration as she realized that the prince had not only defended himself but turned the entire encounter into a moment of reckoning.